As you were.
Okay. Well, thank you, Carl, and it's really a pleasure to welcome Monique Quarterman here today to share her experiences and perspectives on developing intellectual property and commercialization at the University of Kentucky, or she'll tell us about Kentucky Commercialization Ventures. So Monique serves as executive director for KCV, Kentucky Commercialization Ventures. KCV is a public-private partnership that unites Kentucky's institutes of higher education to expand innovation and commercialization statewide. Monique's own innovation was recognized by a Lab to Market Inclusive Innovation Ecosystems Prize award in 2021 from the U.S. Small Business Administration. She also serves as a co-investigator to the statewide Kentucky Network for Innovation and Commercialization program funded in part by NIH, and as a co-lead for the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Working Group within the NIH's National Proof of Concept Network of Innovation Hubs. So Monique and herself is very well connected and has been through a lot of the steps and processes of developing commercialization in Kentucky, and I am really pleased that she's taking the time to share some of her experiences here with us. So welcome, Monique. I really appreciate having your insights.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And truly, I am so excited to be joining you all today. I have been admiring you all since I heard from you about you on the panel that Dr. Drew and I shared together was that translational science that we were at with Ashim?
Gosh, I think so. I don't even remember. It was the SBIR.
That's right.
Meeting,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sponsored. Yeah.
And so glad that I could meet her, and so thrilled that I get to meet all of you. Welcome from, I'm broadcasting here from Louisville, Kentucky, which is known for the famous Kentucky Derby. We very much so celebrate and believe in horse racing, and the bluegrass is true. I think it has a shade of blue, but some people will argue. Really, really happy to join you, and let me share a couple of slides. What I'd like to talk about today is just my overall pathway to inclusive innovation. I really like to focus on innovation projects that are centered in partnership and allowing more opportunity for those that may not consider themselves as innovators or entrepreneurs to have an opportunity to really reach new fields and new solutions, new startups, and really, really fortunate to be able to do that in my day-to-day work at KCV. And so I'm going to share some slides here. And please let me know if this shows up on your end.
Yep, we're seeing your screen and your presentation.
Fantastic. Now. Thank you. So a little bit about my background before I jump in to all the fun commercialization things. I'm originally from Hardin County, Kentucky. The closest landmark is the Fort Knox Gold Vault. I used to pass it every day on the way to school. Truly, it's a rural area that also has ties to government, with a base being there. And so it's a little bit of the best of both worlds in having access to wonderful agricultural programs, but also really understanding the role that policy and systems play on communities. And so as I started to work in innovation, starting at the University of Louisville's Technology Transfer Office, throughout my career, there has been a theme of inclusive innovation. And I'll tell you a little bit about what that means. So at University of Louisville, working in tech transfer, I basically graduated within the Office of Research and Innovation to start working on the government partnerships and grants that we were working on. And we were very fortunate in that we were able to get our first REACH grant in the state. It's an instrument available from the National Institutes of Health that invest in very early stage, phase 00 human health innovations. And also while I was there, we proposed in an unsolicited proposal to the National Science Foundation a program called Aware Access, which Aware Access was designed to create opportunities in STEM commercialization for women and minority faculty members between 3 campuses. So I spearheaded that partnership between University of Louisville, Indiana University, and Missouri S&T. And I believe that program is still going on in at least a different way. I did a panel earlier this week where a good friend of mine from the first WARE program was able to join us, and they're still going strong on their equity initiatives as well. After leaving the academic commercialization sphere, I jumped right into startups. I joined a woman-owned, Black-owned engineering firm called MemSTEM. I was its first employee upon earning its Phase 2 Small Business Innovation Research Grant. It was fantastic. We were printing cochlear implant leads. The founder is still at it and the company has grown. I absolutely love them. But I started to get the entrepreneurial bug myself. And so I started an innovation consulting firm where I was able to work on some research projects a little bit more directly. So in doing the Hunger Innovation Fellowship, it was a partnership between 2 of Kentucky's largest philanthropic foundations. And the goal was to look at food insecurity across our region and design community-based solutions for food insecurity. That project was very special to me because it said, you know, let's not only rely on our academic environment, but let's reach directly into the affected communities and support them in coming up with solutions that can be systemic and long lasting. Related to that, I did a legal epidemiology project with the Centers for Disease Control and Temple University in partnership with our Louisville Metro Public Health and Wellness Department. That is a very long name. It took me forever to get it right. But the goal of that project, legal epidemiology is really a super scary word for taking the laws of different cities, picking them apart to find the best language and best practice that impacts health. And so we looked at a couple of different cities that had language in its laws about addressing food insecurity, and we put them together in one project to find what we could bring home to Kentucky. And so what these projects in community had in common was finding people that could benefit from innovation and really supplying them with the tools that they need to be part of the solution and drive the solution. And staying involved in academic commercialization, it was wonderful. I was doing some consulting for our state for our innovation matching funds program. And we had a good conversation at our Capitol. And that conversation revolved around, we know we have an engaged innovation community, but we know that there's a lot of potential. In the state of Kentucky, there's about just over 200,000 in the higher ed space that would be eligible to commercialize. How do we maximize that as much as possible to beyond the typical community that we've already been engaging? And you know, it's wonderful sort of serendipity how things happen in between. But a couple months went by, worked on a couple advisory councils, and this idea of Kentucky Commercialization Ventures arose, which Kentucky Commercialization Ventures is a partnership that really is designed to pinpoint how to unlock that hard lockbox of getting more people involved in commercialization. And it's right in the center of some other work that we're doing in Kentucky, specific to the Kinetic Hub, which is the statewide grant for biomedical innovations that even engages our public community and technical colleges. But then also some wider work with the NIH Proof of Concept Network, which I'll cover a little bit more soon. It's all of the NIH innovation hubs that have been invested in from the NIH for commercialization focus, working together to improve EDI across the United States. And so I'll come back to that. So a little bit of background on innovation in Kentucky, because I think one of the questions that I receive most often is, why and where did you get started and when did you recognize that a solution was needed? Truly for me, I recognized that a solution was needed when you go to an innovation event and you look to your left and you look to your right, and you start to recognize that the crowd is not as diverse as the population is in your city, in your state, in your region. And so when we look at academic commercialization, it's very similar, right? We have two wonderful large Research One institutions, University of Kentucky and University of Louisville, who have participated in research and gotten awards and just done wonderful work. But we have a total of 24 institutions, public higher education institutions in Kentucky. And how do we broaden that attention and those resources to all of them? So as you can see here in this graphic, the R1 institutions, just over 50,000, their community that's eligible for commercialization. This is faculty, staff, and students. When we broaden our perspective to include the regional institutions, this is the regional universities in Kentucky, but also the community and technical colleges. It's a community of about 150,000 that previously were not receiving dedicated commercialization support. By working together, this community size explodes. And really, KCV is a solution to make innovation more inclusive and connected statewide. We want to engage as many Kentuckians as possible to access and participate in the innovation process. And so here we have Kentucky Commercialization Ventures. We officially launched in July of last year, but truly the initiative is much older than that, and that we've had previous iterations and a whole lot of conversation and research that went into this solution. And we're very fortunate to have a lot of support. So our statewide partners include University of Louisville and University of Kentucky, our R1s that I mentioned earlier. But also our Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education, our Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development as our primary funder, and our Kentucky Science and Technology Corporation as our lead. KSTC is actually a nonprofit that has been serving STEM programs in our state for over 30 years. And so it was a natural fit to unveil something like this. But what we're really excited about is how many more students, especially, that we can engage in this partnership of this size. KCV really kind of has two arms. One is the Kentucky Commercialization Ventures sort of intellectual property and commercialization support. And then the other arm is something that is brand new. It's a Kentucky Intellectual Property Alliance, which is the broad community in Kentucky, anyone that would touch IP in any way, whether you're an inventor, an attorney, a higher ed administrator, someone in tech transfer, a faculty member that is thinking about coming up with something. It is a platform and group designed to really push that community into the future. And so when I say statewide representation, what does that look like? Here is a map of our state of Kentucky. We truly mean statewide. We stretch corner to corner in the different campuses that we serve. And so my mighty team are always either on Zoom or on the road, really trying to draw in as many people as possible into commercialization. And it's not only our academic communities that we're interfacing with, because really they rely on their surrounding communities, even, I would say, equivalent to or even more so than the research ones. So we're often talking with chambers of commerce and legislators, really anyone that can have influence over the resources that are available on a campus for commercialization. And so my staff, this is my favorite slide because I love my team. And there's so many reasons why I do. So we have 2 KCV licensing and new ventures managers, and we're currently hiring a community manager. And so our team will grow very, very soon. Excited about that. But one of the reasons why I admire my team so much is that they are very connected to equity, diversity, and inclusion personally. So to give you an example, Dr. Megan Anstoos was recently recognized by Autumn as Volunteer of the Year, mainly due to her service as the lead of the EDI committee for the Autumn National Organization. And Kayla Meisner, I'm super proud of her. She serves on boards like Queer Kentucky, and she recently joined the board of Venture Connectors here in Louisville, Kentucky, specifically for the purpose of getting more investment dollars into the hands of more startups that are reflective of community. And then the logos across the bottom, I have to point as well, we work very closely with a core team that includes the different organizations. So we meet every 2 weeks with KSTC, our cabinet, UK, U of L, and our Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education, because together we can reach so much bigger of a community. And so we regularly do. And so a little bit of background on each of these. KSTC, I mentioned, is a statewide nonprofit. It works as an umbrella for several programs in STEM. And this is so important because we don't try to or even claim that we could do it all. I really rely on my team at KSTC to support in different ways. So to give you an example, KSTC is also home to the Kentucky Procurement Technical Assistance Center, another very long name, but what it means is that they are a federally funded program that is designed to connect small businesses in Kentucky to opportunities to partner with government. So they work everything from getting people registered for SBIR to finding primes that people can work with to access DoD funds. They're just phenomenal. Another program I work with at KSTC is our Kentucky Enterprise Fund. And these are public dollars from the state of Kentucky that is an investment pool. So Kelby Price is executive director of that. We often talk about what are some new things that are going to be invested in Kentucky, why they're being chosen, and I'm able to bring that information back to our higher education community. And the same goes for our Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development. Our administration is very forward focused on entrepreneurship. So in addition to Kentucky Commercialization Ventures, it supports 6 regional entrepreneurship hubs called the Kentucky Innovation Hubs, and they are a front door to the public for entrepreneurship. So for example, the hub in Northern Kentucky, anyone can walk in and say, I want to start a new company. Where do I start? And that regional hub is designed specifically to get them access and connected to what they need. So a lot of times we will tag team different groups that are looking to start a business. We focus more on the higher education side, but we rely upon our Kentucky Innovation Hub partners to help them along when it comes to the pure small business development side. And of course, University of Kentucky and University of Louisville, they are so valuable to us because they have the largest and oldest tech transfer offices in our state, the only tech transfer offices in our state. So we're always leaning upon them to really innovate, especially in the area of updating policy at our regional partners. Our Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education is that higher education backbone in the middle of all of it. So they handle a lot of the regulations when it comes to higher ed, approving new programs. They really just know everyone. And so what's the importance of this? The takeaway from this right now is partnerships should be effective. I can't say enough times that in coalition building, Sometimes you will see groups put together coalitions and it's just for show. They really may not actually work together every day. We are the complete opposite. We work together every single day. And that's really the only way that we have been able to taste success from this KCV partnership. And so the big picture, zooming out a little bit, we together believe that ideas from Kentucky will change and improve lives. There are many different definitions that people have tried and probably will continue to apply to Kentucky commercialization ventures, and that's okay. I've heard tech transfer, I've heard industry engagement, I've heard nonprofit service center or ESO. Really, we're all of the above. And the reason why we're all of the above is because we are really trying to grow more grassroots participation from our regional colleges and universities by any means necessary, working hand in hand with those campuses. We have a champion located at each campus to really work through their needs in real time. Some of our campuses, for example, already had health centers or maybe already had a research foundation. Some of them are starting from square one, really trying to figure out, how do I build out an IP policy? And so we meet them where they are with the goal to have more innovators from more campuses. And really, this is a follow-on to a lot of the investment that has already been happening within some of these communities, right? So I like to include this as well, because I don't want to give us too much credit. Our Northern Kentucky University partner is just phenomenal. And in 2018, they opened a $108 million health innovation center in partnership with a medical center in the community. And it's home to the Institute for Health Innovation, some health simulation labs, and even a makerspace. They recently won an EDA Sprint grant for its Northern Kentucky Collaborative. I was just there on Monday. They opened it right there in Northern Kentucky next to Cincinnati, Ohio. And it's just phenomenal. And so the way that we approach them is to try to be that commercialization tech transfer function for a lot of the ideation that is coming out of this initial investment that they've made. Another example is Kentucky State University, which Kentucky State University is a public, historically Black college and university. It's land grant and it's located in Frankfort, Kentucky, in our capital. The Atwood Research Facility has been there years and years and years, but in 2020, with a $7.5 million grant in partnership with the USDA, they funded 14 new research labs, a teaching lab, some classrooms and offices, just really trying to reinvigorate the work that they're doing and also working on expanding their teaching farm. And so really the way that we've stepped in and supported them is to get them to start thinking about, this is all excellent. How do we turn this into something that is revenue generating? How do we get more attention to the work that you're doing? How do we get you more resources that you deserve? And so to zoom out a little bit, so when we look at the services grid of technology transfer, industry engagement, new ventures, and something multi-institutional. And looking at Kentucky in the past, there's never been something that's checked all the boxes. Research One universities get really, really close in that they usually have an office or an individual assigned to each sort of area. But when you look at the regional universities and community and technical colleges, a lot of times these supports are either rare or inconsistent. And when that happens, and there's not sort of a fail-safe for any of these functions, someone can't easily work their way through that complex commercialization process, which is a real problem because when you look at the population of our regional colleges and universities, that's where the most of our diversity comes from, both geographic diversity, ethnic, gender diversity, et cetera, across the board. So we needed a solution to get more people connected to innovation. And so when we introduced Kentucky Commercialization Ventures, we came into it with trying to do a little bit of each of these. So our licensing and new ventures managers are both checking off that tech transfer and industry engagement, but also that startup coaching. And that multi-institutional aspect is that we oversee this commercialization process for a total of 22 campuses, but in partnership with our one institutions. And so people a lot of times will ask, how? This sounds extremely complicated. It sounds fun, but extremely complicated. And to that, I push back and say, kind of, but not too much. The great thing about our partnership, we launched it in July. We had our collaboration agreements in place with each of our institutions, I think by October, November. The reason why we were able to move at such a fast pace is that we introduced a lot of flexibility and a lot of choice in the process. That's really essential when designing programs around EDI and inclusivity. We try to allow as much flexibility as possible because we're not trying to make all of our campuses exactly the same. That is impossible. We really just are trying to meet them where they are and help them where they feel they need the help. And so to be eligible for KCV services, teams must be affiliated with a public higher education institution in Kentucky. So that can be faculty, staff, or student. And typically it's the institution's intellectual property policy that dictates how these groups can actually interact with us. That's IP policy is very important. Second, they must submit an idea disclosure form to their home institution, very common for all institutions across our nation. And then the team's institution must consent to the team accessing KCV services. So when they submit this opt-in to partner with KCV, it triggers a sustainability component, which is a revenue share on successful ideas. And depending on how much service they receive from Kentucky Commercialization Ventures dictates how much comes back in the form of that sustainability component. Some teams just need a cheerleader, right? Some teams need a cheerleader and very, very heavy intellectual property support. Some teams need all of the above, and some industry engagement too. And so we try to be flexible to meet that need. But in addition to this direct team support, I can't take away the fact that we support our partner institutions in a broader sense as well. We try to get them plugged into what's happening in innovation across our nation in every way possible. So I'm constantly sending them grant opportunities. We're constantly writing letters of support. We are connecting them to different agencies to boost the success of their proposals. It's really a wraparound sort of relationship because the growth of their innovation campus will trigger the growth of more opportunity. And so another big thing, which is kind of my favorite thing, is metrics, because how do you measure a behemoth like this, right? To tell you a really quick funny story, I first got my first dance with metrics in designing the Aware Access program with the National Science Foundation, which I mentioned earlier was a grant program designed to connect more women and minority faculty to commercialization opportunity. And I'll never forget the program manager of that called me one day and said, well, Monique, how are you going to measure this? And don't use anything that we've ever seen before. And I really appreciate that challenge now, right? Because really he was asking, don't measure for the purpose of checking the box, measure for the purpose of tracking the impact. And that really stuck with me for every innovation program or community initiative I've ever done ever since. I have my metrics that check the box, and I have my metrics that really try to take a pulse of, are we successful in what we're doing? So we measure all kinds of things, coaching sessions, your typical technology transfer set of metrics of how many licenses, disclosures, et cetera. But we also measure geographic representation. Are we only supporting the east part of Kentucky? Are we only supporting Southern Kentucky? But also demographics of the teams that we engage. And then on top of that, we're measuring ecosystem growth, which is the university development components. How many intellectual property policies are we updating? How often are we affecting them? But also community development. Are we going after new opportunities, partnerships, grants, et cetera, that are designed to improve the profile of our state when it comes to competing in innovation? These are each things that trickle down to the success stories because they hit the success story in different ways. And so I'll share a couple of them with you. So we mentioned earlier the Lab to Market Inclusive Innovation Ecosystems Prize. I am so excited about this because it was a competition under which the Small Business Administration took submissions of different programs across the United States that are aiming to improve inclusivity. They judged them and sort of picked out some of the most forward thinking. And so we won the Visionary Prize, and I'm super proud of that. It's just a reflection of how our state has really come together to engage more people in innovation. But also we're seeing some impacts in the form of team progression. So our Eastern Kentucky University recently won several awards to advance commercialization. Two were our Kinetic Reach Grant Awards, which I'm so proud of that team. In the history of the REACH program being in Kentucky since 2015, they were the first regional team awarded. So super, super proud of them. And they inspired our REACH Hub to look at really altering the way that we judge awards to encourage more regional awards going out every year. Also, we had another team from Eastern Kentucky University recently win the 2021 Global Health Innovation Conference Pitch Prize. This was huge because when we first sent the opportunity, he was very unsure of himself, wasn't sure, how would this come out? We supported him the whole way. His name's Dr. Jason Marion, and he has a technology to test water quality, which he's in partnership with Kenya to use in the communities there and really continue testing the product. But it also has a lot of relevance to our state because a significant portion of our state is still dependent on well water, which it can be used for that too. And so these are some of an example of some of the early outcomes that we're seeing. In Northern Kentucky, they've had a lot more progression in the form of grant opportunities that we partnered with together to bring more federal dollars into the community to support them interacting with more people across the several counties of Northern Kentucky. And so let me wrap this part with just a couple lessons learned because I feel like I'm learning every day and I should write them down more often because they're always really valuable lessons. But the first one has to be embracing the differences. So one of the things that we talk about often on my team, because they come from the traditional tech transfer environment, is that our regional partners are teach first institutions, and we have to be okay with that. It doesn't mean that less research will happen or a different level of quality will happen. It just means that we have to approach it differently. We have to be more thoughtful about the time that goes into commercialization. We have to be more thoughtful about the products that we're expecting to come out of our campuses. And this really has helped our inclusivity focus. Two is don't stop learning and pivot, pivot, pivot. I think we had a complete picture made up of how our KCV initiative would work at the very beginning. And it could not be more different now. A lot of the basic structures and tenets remain the same, but we've really tried to keep ourselves open as possible to be responsive to the need. 3, engage your stakeholders. Your partners are partners for a reason, and they should only be partners if they can bring you some sort of value. each one of our partners with KCV are so valuable and have contributed so much. And it's because we have made it a regular practice to communicate to them what we need. And when we communicate with them, we're not only talking in terms of what do we need for this initiative to move forward, but we're also having big open conversations about what these campuses need in general, the way that they work. This helps every level of innovation in Kentucky, from the industry side to the higher ed side to the government side, really start to think really innovatively about how to create new resources. And then last, leverage your ecosystem. I mentioned earlier that we work with the innovation hubs and the KSTC programs and the R1 institutions and its programs. That is so important because no one office, no one team can do it all. If you take a moment to recognize and appreciate how each of these programs and teams are differentiated, each of them can play their role and work in harmony. So a quick example of that, University of Kentucky offers a UXL commercialization education program, and they have, in partnership with KCV, opened it to be statewide. The beauty of it is we have a selection committee coming up. One of our KCV champions at Murray State University is joining that selection panel. There's a different partner that joins each time. So if they don't have a team going into the program, they still have impact on the program and are learning from the program. And I think that's so important. And so before I open to questions, I just wanted to say, let's talk more. We are online, we are on social media. I love when people reach out to me. Most frequently lately, I hear from people asking about the Proof of Concept Network Action Committee on EDI that we're working on in partnership with the NIH. Really, there's so much ahead for us, for all of our innovation hubs, really looking to define inclusivity for what it means to each of our communities, and then connect it to the opportunities and resources at the NIH to really accelerate what we're doing. Anyone that is interested in that sort of work, or just interested in talking more about what you can do at your campus, always feel free to reach out to me. And thank you so much for turning on inclusive captions. That's something we've tried to do more often in our state. And so thrilled for you all having me. And I'll take any questions.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I have many, but I'll wait and give other people a chance as well. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Kelly, this is Peter. Hopefully, Monique, you can hear me through my mask.
Yes, I can.
Great, good. I guess my question is, how do you select your local champions? You mentioned about them. What is it? Particular colleges, they've submitted projects with you, they've done disclosures. How do you select a local champion? Then how do you work with them between the different physical locations?
That's a great question, Peter. Thank you for it. So we selected our champions through history a little bit. So I mentioned earlier that we had previous iterations and research and conversations around it. It started with a summit at the University of Kentucky, where there was just an open invitation to each institution of, if you're interested in more commercialization, come talk to us. And it ended up being a convening of the presidents of each institution, which was fantastic because for each campus, it allowed them to really plug into the exact person that would be handling these things. And so when it came time to do the collaboration agreements, that was pretty sorted out all the way up through the administration level for each campus. But I cannot stress enough, we touch a lot of points at each campus. Usually our champions have the role of, we copy them into different business dealings and disclosures and things just for accountability's sake. But really some of the relationships on the campuses take a life of their own. The champion always signs off on the opt-in and the disclosure because of course they have their own administrative duties related to handling a disclosure. We also send them regular opportunities to partner or grow their innovation campuses in ways, so different funding opportunities. But other than that, we really strike up our own relationship at the campus and typically try not to bug them unless we have something really transactional on the table.
Great, thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Monique, this is Mark.
Yeah, go for it, Mark.
Hi, Monique. This is Mark Billingsley. I run our tech transfer office here, actually, and it's something like an innovation hub as well, supporting startups, and we try to do as much as we can with industry engagement, but we don't have quite as much bandwidth for that. But really, on the point of engaging underrepresented groups, we've got a sincere interest in doing that. But it seems like mostly we just end up bolstering the underrepresented folks who are already engaged. We've definitely got a lot of room to grow there. This is the University of Alaska Fairbanks is a minority serving institute. I've really started to listen to like these autumn sessions or read things that come across in newsletters that come to me. But it seems like the answers on increasing engagement in this particular sphere are often so specific to the location. So I continue looking for sort of best practices that are transportable to our context. But I don't expect you to really have an answer. It's kind of a comment, but do you have like a resource for best practices? And I know that there's sort of in general, we all need to do better, but especially in this particular context. Yeah. Thanks.
That's a fantastic question, Mark. I love that. I love that question / comment. I hear it all the time, and that's really what we gathered around for the Proof of Concept Network. Really, to me, it is a formula, and it's a formula that I've seen work before, is that it has to be community, representation, and resources. Typically, that triangle is what gets the best results. And here's what I mean by that. Community in the sense of, so one of the things that I was working on at the time that we had the investment from the National Science Foundation for Aware Access is that I was in community volunteering to produce the Diversity Pitch Fest. And it was purely a community gathering that was sponsored by our local corporation, Humana, that was designed to bring more people from our surrounding communities together just to talk about tech innovation and celebrate it and say, wow, that's cool to the ones that are doing it already. But it means a lot to be able to, look to your left, look to your right, and see more people that are representative of the community. And the beauty of that was that community follows. So when we went to have our Aware Access conference, for the first 2 years, it was at another campus, really heavy academic community, and the turnout was nice, but our biggest turnout was when it came home to Louisville, and I was able to advertise the event to all of the people that had engaged with the Diversity Pitch Fest. Not only did we get a bigger turnout, but we got more people from the academic environment that identify as those groups, because there's that sense of community there, right? The other aspect that I hear often for the Proof of Concept Network is representation. Of that, when underrepresented groups are interfacing with commercialization, it helps to have people representative of these groups and representative of these communities in positions of leadership or facilitating the groups and in the room. That is so important when it comes to building lasting programs. One of the best programs that I have seen with nailing the representation aspect is the Enrich program that is out of Jackson State University and partnered with University of Kentucky. It is a HBCU commercialization education training program that is open to all HBCUs across the United States. And the best part about it is that the people that are putting it on and doing the facilitation, the marginalized communities are overrepresented. which I think is pretty meaningful when it comes to attracting a crowd and really continuing to engage them. But also, let's not forget resources, resources, resources. That is so important, especially when you look at the disparities in investment for startups. I think I've seen data that relates to funding for women and minorities, the percentage being very low when it comes to venture capital funds. However, there are other resources that I've seen people tap into that are a lot more reliable when it comes to success rate. It's one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of the Small Business Innovation Research Program. I'm a huge fan of it because not only do they achieve better numbers as far as funding women and minority organizations, but they're actively, constantly seeking more people to apply. And that makes all the difference as well. Some institutions and community go as far as creating specialized resources, whether that is an innovation fund or some sort of community funded instrument. All of these things, representation, community, and resources are ways to attract more people beyond who you already have in your circle. That was a great question, Mark.
That's a great response. Thanks. I can kind of keep that formula in my head when I think about these problems going forward. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I've got a really quick question. This is Kelly. You mentioned state match for SBIR. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly. That's a great question. So I am a huge SBIR nerd. Even before I started working with our state on our matching funds program, it's probably one of the most celebrated innovation instruments in our state. Our Kentucky Matching Funds program basically is for Kentucky-based organizations, whether already in Kentucky or interested in relocating to Kentucky. Once you receive your federal SBIR STTR, our state will match that award in a competitive process up to $500,000. And what is really cool about it is that we know that federal small business innovation research dollars are typically dollars that are very stringent about how you can use the funds. A lot of it is for the technological advancement of the innovation. They really don't give you a lot of wiggle room to spend the money on business development specifically. Our Kentucky matching funds could not be more opposite. They encourage using the funds for the business development aspect of the job. And so it has been effective to attract a number of companies to Kentucky, including the medical device company that I mentioned earlier that I joined. It's just a fantastic instrument that organizations can go after time and time again. I think we're currently having one cycle per year, but companies can get it multiple times. So over a couple of SBIRs, you could easily hit over $1 million in additional funds to grow your business in Kentucky. It's a great question.
I would really like to advocate that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a follow-up question.
Go for it.
If you got a second. Yeah, on that matching funds. On the matching funds, do you know on the agencies that offer phase 3 opportunities, will they count those matching funds as for phase 3 match requirements?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't believe it goes as far as phase 3. The last question that I received is if the Kentucky Matching Funds program reaches into phase 2B. And I think very recently, Kentucky kind of constrained it to phase 1 and phase 2 only because there's so much interest and it's hard to meet it all. But phase 3, I haven't heard of it being used for any of that in the past.
On the phase 3 stuff, most of the phase 3 award, which isn't really SBIR money, it's actually a contract. They require you to have a match in order to get those contracts. And I just wondered if they would count those matching funds as that match or not. So.
And that's a great question, Jonathan. And it reminds me to say Even though I've never seen the Kentucky matching funds used for phase 3 match, the beauty of our administration is that they are extremely approachable about some of these. I mean, even coming up with letters of support for some of our campuses, it is more so than ever before a conversation and negotiation. They really bend over backwards to make things work. And so if a company did come to me and ask me about phase 3 match, I would probably connect them direct to our cabinet, which is pretty rare when looking at different states. But we have that very approachable culture here in Kentucky. That's special.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I've talked to the legislature in the past, Alaska legislature, I've mentioned the match concept and kind of thrown it out there as hopefully something that they would pick up. It hasn't gotten action, and I've explained we're often have Hawaii as a comparable. And I think I was talking to their person who leads their SBIR match program, and I think they started off one year with just like $200,000 or some pretty small amount. In the state, the legislature had found enough value in it so that they've increased it, and it's worth, and a total sum of money that they put into it every year is quite a bit more than that now. I think it'll be great. So I can tell you guys that I'm advocating for it in Alaska, and you should too, to your local state legislator.
Absolutely. And don't forget our lesson learned from legal epidemiology, right? It's an incredibly horrific name, but all it means is looking at legislation or law in other places and bringing it back to use in your own community. I would totally recommend looking at the legalese in Kentucky, looking at it in Hawaii. Sometimes if you can come to your legislators with model language, it makes it a lot easier for them to pick up and run with. That's a great point.
This is Denise. And yes, that is very true. And I just wanted to mention that Alaska used to have the Alaska Science and Technology Foundation that provided startup funds for entrepreneurs involved in science and technology. So we've got, some history of our state providing funding support for, research activities, and we just need to remind our legislature about that and its value. So, thanks.
Kai
That's
has
a
his
great
hand
point.
up.
Oh, great. Thanks. Monica, thanks so much, or Monique, for the presentation. Kind of a two-part question, and I just wonder if either one kind of elicits some thoughts you have. One is there's work going on here in Alaska to look at how to integrate a more of a innovation coalition approach across the community. The Calgary Innovation Coalition might be one that you're familiar with. I think it's kind of leading the way. So I'm kind of wondering how this Kentucky Ventures and this group, works into the rest of the community coalition organizing. Second piece of this is I'm intensely interested in the use of reverse pitch challenges and other areas to share the key challenges that matter in the community as a way to align all of these institutions on key priority challenge areas to create the awareness. And I'm thinking particularly of minority communities, that sometimes we need to help everyone know what the challenges are to work on, where the opportunities are, in order to create the alignment that you're trying to create now. And I'm wondering what you've done that maybe helps bring that kind of awareness to the challenges, the investable challenges that matter, and how that maybe ties into this coalition strategy beyond just the academic coalition that you've built.
Yes, I love that question, Kai. To your first question, I would say Kentucky Commercialization Ventures was a springboard opportunity, really. And I didn't expect it coming into this role, but everyone that has a wonderful idea for bringing community together, they usually start here, which is a wonderful compliment because it is a reflection of that we are structurally placed in the middle of so many different communities that impact innovation. And so our first sort of round of coalition building outside of the KCV structure was this Kentucky Intellectual Property Alliance. They started in Georgia with this concept, and it grew to several different states, New York, Illinois. I think once we launch officially next month, we'll be number 5. But really, it is a convening of industry, academics, people in community, inventors associations, all of the above, anyone that's involved in idea creation or design creation, just coming together and working together on the changes that impact IP. That was much needed in our state because as the USPTO issues all of these requests for comments and changes coming into legislation, there really wasn't a platform by which we could work together and talk through these issues and understand how it's impacting each part of our community. But then also it's responsive to need in that Kentucky, there's a USPTO infographic out there that shows the Midwest specifically in IP attainment graphically. And there's color all over the map, but when you get to Kentucky, it's centralized dots in Lexington, Louisville, and Cincinnati, which we appreciate their performance, but we want to see more color on our map indicative of more IP attainment. So we're really hopeful for our Kentucky IP Alliance doing so. But also to the second part of your question, reverse pitch competitions, I'm really excited about that because we are trying the first one in our state in a couple of months. And this is pretty, it always puts a smile on my face to think about it. Kentucky produces a whole lot of bourbon. I think we're the bourbon capital of the world. And one byproduct of all that bourbon is that there's a lot of leftover material from the mash, which you can't just dump it somewhere because it's an environmental hazard. And so we have all this leftover mash and really no ideas on what to do with it. So our first reverse pitch competition is our Distillers Association working through our Cabinet for Economic Development to really fund good ideas on what to do with this mash so that we can reduce the amount of environmental externality that comes from producing all this bourbon. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to is copying the model with all of the nonprofit foundations that we have here in Kentucky. I'm interested to see how the Distillers Association one goes so I can take the tidbits from it and rework it in partnership with some of our health issues and socioeconomic issues in Kentucky, but we're just getting started. So I love that question.
Thanks so much for that answer. And just, I just got to say, my name is Kai. It's not Kentucky. So much fun when I saw this come up that we were having a Kentucky discussion, because it's always fun when folks get my name mixed up with the state. So I'm so glad to hear what you're doing in Kentucky. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm definitely going to remember your name, Kai. Awesome. I know we have just 2 more moments. Any more questions? You all had the best questions ever. I love having these conversations, but you guys are extra wonderful and creative. Thank you so much for having me today. I was really so excited to join you all after hearing a little bit more about you from Dr. Drew on our panel. You guys did not disappoint. I'm more than happy to visit at any time. Hopefully we can have an update at some point. All of you, of course, are always welcome to visit Kentucky. And so if you're making a trip through, please do reach out to me. Really, really grateful for sharing this time. And I look forward to following the work that you all are doing as well. I'm going to steal the idea for the Journal Club. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Monique.
Thank you.